At 2:17 in the morning, the police called to tell Luther folks that his wife was safe. That was the first sign something was terribly wrong. Because if she was safe, it meant there had been a reason to wonder. It meant Loretta had been somewhere that required a police officer to pick up a phone and lead with that word to a husband who did not even know his wife had left the house. Safe. Luther sat on the edge of their bed in the dark, holding that word, and understood that he had been sleeping through something he should have been awake for. His name was Luther Folks. And this is the story of what he slept through, what his wife carried alone, and what it cost both of them before the truth finally came out. Stay with it, because where it ends is not where you think it is going. This is not a story that starts with the wedding, or the apartment on Carver Avenue, or 8 years of a good marriage. None of that is where it actually starts. This story starts on a Thursday night in October, 11 months before that phone call. Luther woke up at 2 in the morning the way he sometimes did. He was a light sleeper, always had been. He reached across to Loretta's side of the bed out of habit, the automatic reach of someone who has shared a bed long enough that the other person's presence becomes something the body checks for before the mind fully wakes. She was not there. He lay still. Told himself she had gotten up for water. Told himself she was on the couch. He waited 5 minutes, then 10. Got up and walked through the apartment. Couch, empty. Kitchen, empty. Bathroom light off. Her coat was gone from the hook by the door. Her keys were gone from the bowl. His wife had left their apartment at 2 in the morning on a Thursday and said nothing. He called her phone. For rings. Voicemail. He went back to bed. Built a story to fall asleep to. Family emergency. Something she had not wanted to wake him for. A reason that would make sense in the morning. She came home at 5:40. He heard the door open, heard her careful steps through the hall, and something made him close his eyes and keep his breathing even. She slid back into bed beside him. Within a few minutes she was asleep. He lay in the dark next to her with his eyes open and said nothing. She said nothing at breakfast. Nothing that weekend. And the following Thursday she left again. Those weeks did something to Luther. He did not jump straight to the worst conclusion. He went to concern first. Was something wrong with her health? Her mother in Columbus? Her brother in Atlanta? He gave her every possible explanation that was not the one quietly forming at the back of his mind. But concern that goes unanswered does not stay concern. It shifts. It gets heavier. It gets specific. By the 6th Thursday he was not just worried. He was watching her. The way she went quiet on Wednesday evenings. The way she checked her phone and set it face down on the counter without a word. The way her clothes were already laid out on the bedroom chair before she went to sleep on Thursday nights, like someone planning to move fast in the dark. Then Luther found the receipt. It was a Tuesday. Luther was looking for the car insurance card in the kitchen drawer when he pulled out a folded piece of paper that had slipped between 2 envelopes. He almost put it back without opening it. Something made him look. Cash withdrawal. $240. From an ATM he did not recognize on Wendell Court, a street he had no reason to associate with anything in their life. Dated the previous Thursday at 12:22 in the morning. He stood at that kitchen counter for a long time. $240 in cash at 12:20 in the morning. A street he had no reason to know. A withdrawal she had said nothing about. He folded it back up. Put it exactly where he found it. And said nothing. But he thought about it constantly. He built a version of the truth around that receipt the way you build a case when you are trying not to believe what the evidence is suggesting. He told himself there was an explanation. That he was reading into it. That if he asked her and the answer was simple he would feel like a fool for doubting her. And underneath all of that he was thinking about how little he actually knew about where she was going. And who else might be there? There was a Wednesday night when Luther almost asked her. They were sitting at the kitchen table after dinner. She was quieter than usual. He had been carrying the question for weeks and it was right there, fully formed, ready. He opened his mouth. He looked at her face. And he closed it again. Not because he was afraid of her answer. Because he was afraid of what the asking would cost them. Once a question like that is in the air between two people, it does not go back. So he sat there and said nothing, and she cleared the dishes and they went to bed, and he lay in the dark one more time telling himself a story he was no longer sure he believed. He came close again on a Thursday, 3 weeks before the phone call. She was getting ready to leave. He heard her moving carefully through the bedroom. He heard the soft sound of the front door being pulled shut with both hands, the way you close a door when you do not want the latch to click. Luther sat up in bed in the dark. He put his feet on the floor. He sat there for 30 full seconds with every intention of grabbing his keys and following her. And then he did not move. Not because he trusted her. Because he was not ready to know the truth. That distinction matters. It says something about where Luther was in those months that he has had to sit with honestly. He lay back down. He stared at the ceiling. He let her go. Loretta worked as a case manager at a non-profit on Reading Road that helped formerly incarcerated people rebuild their lives. She had done that work for 9 years. She brought it home with her the way people bring home work they actually believe in. She would tell Luther about cases without names or details, just the situations. The walls people hit. The way systems designed to help would sometimes be the very things grinding people down. Luther listened in the way he thought was enough. That is the more honest version of what he did. He listened in the way he thought counted. He did not understand yet that there is a difference between that and actually listening. Between a peaceful marriage and a close one. Luther had been living inside that gap for years without knowing it had a name. There was also a Wednesday night, about 3 weeks before the phone call. Not the kitchen table night. A different one. It was late. They had both been quiet through dinner. She was loading the dishwasher and Luther was sitting at the counter watching her. The question had been sitting in his chest for so long it had started to feel physical. He said her name. She turned around. And he looked at her. Really looked at her. And he saw something he had not registered before. She was exhausted. Not the regular tired of a long week. The kind of tired that lives behind a person's eyes when they have been holding something heavy without once setting it down. He had seen that look on the faces of people she described from work. People navigating things alone that they should have had help with. He had not seen it on her face until that moment. And instead of asking the real question, Luther said, "Are you okay?" She said, "I'm just tired." I said, "Okay." They went to bed. Luther had thought about that exchange many times since. He had the chance to go deeper. He did not take it. Not because he did not care. Because somewhere over the years he had learned, without noticing he was learning it, to accept the surface answer. She offered the easy version and he received it and they both moved on and called it a peaceful night. That specific exchange, lived out across hundreds of ordinary evenings, was the gap. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just two people who had gotten so comfortable with each other that they had stopped asking the questions that actually mattered. Now there is Rupert Gaines. Because without Rupert, this story ends differently. Rupert was 71 years old. He had lived in apartment 3B on Carver Avenue for 32 years. Retired postal worker. Widower. His wife Delphine had passed for years before this, and since then he had lived alone with a small television, a shelf of paperback westerns, and the particular sleeplessness that settles into people after they lose the person who made the nights feel shorter. Rupert was usually awake by midnight. He sat by his window sometimes. He read. Sometimes he just sat in the dark of his kitchen and listened to the building. He had heard Loretta's footsteps for the first time in October, the same month they started. Slow. Deliberate. The specific careful rhythm of someone who does not want to be heard. He opened his door once, just a crack, and caught a glimpse of a woman in a dark coat moving toward the stairs. He did not know her name. Did not know her apartment. He went back inside. But Rupert noticed patterns. 32 years in the same building teaches you its rhythms. And this was new. Every Thursday, just past midnight, the same measured descent. He decided it was not his business. He kept deciding that, the way you keep deciding something when part of you is not convinced. On the Thursday that changed everything, Rupert had been awake since 11. He heard the footsteps at 12:04. Same as always. But that night, for a reason he said he still could not fully explain, he put on his coat, laced his shoes, and followed. He stayed far enough back that she could not hear him. He watched her cross Carver Avenue and walk 2 blocks north. She turned onto Wendell Court and walked to the end of it, to a condemned 4-story brick building with plywood over most of its windows and a chain-link fence around the front. There was a gap along the left side, just large enough to slip through. The building had been sitting empty for 3 years, caught between a developer and a city permit that had not moved. He watched her slip through that gap and disappear inside. Rupert stood on that sidewalk in the cold and waited. Something about the deliberateness of it. 8 months of the same careful footsteps going somewhere that mattered enough to do in secret. He needed to see it through. An hour passed. He was starting to think about the cold in his knees and the paperback Western left open on his kitchen table. And then he heard it. He described it to Luther later, in that police station waiting room, as a sound with no word for it. Not a scream. Not crying. Something lower and older than both. Something that comes from inside a person when the last of something leaves them. He said he had heard it once before, in a hospital room the night his own mother passed. He said once you have heard it, you know it anywhere. He called 911. He stood on that sidewalk with his coat buttoned to the collar until the officers arrived and went inside. And Rupert kept standing there in the dark, waiting, because that was who he was. Luther's phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Unknown Cincinnati number. Something pulled tight in his chest before he answered. Officer Tatum. Cincinnati Police Department. She asked his name. She asked if he was the husband of Loretta Folks. Then she said, "Your wife is safe." Safe. Luther registered the word. He also registered what it meant that she had led with it. You only lead with safe when you need to stop someone from imagining the worst. Which meant the worst had been imaginable. Which meant something had happened that he knew nothing about. He asked what happened. She said she would explain when he arrived. He was dressed and out the door in 4 minutes. He did not remember the drive clearly. He remembered the fluorescent lights of the district for lobby being too bright for 2 in the morning. He gave his name at the front desk and was told to wait. Luther sat in a plastic chair along the wall and his mind started doing what minds do when they are given no information and too much time. It went to the receipt. The ATM on Wendell Court at 12:22 in the morning. $240 in cash. It went to the dark coat. The careful footsteps. The 8 months of Thursday nights she had spent somewhere she could not tell him about. And then it went somewhere he was not proud of. By the time Officer Tatum came to get him, Luther had convinced himself he knew what he was about to hear. He had built the whole story in that plastic chair. The man at the end of it. The reason for the cash. The reason for the silence. He had decided he was about to walk into a room and have his marriage confirmed as something it had never actually been. It was not a vague suspicion. Sitting there under those fluorescent lights at 2:30 in the morning, Luther had assembled every piece he had been carrying for 8 months and they had all locked into place. The receipt. The careful footsteps. The clothes laid out on the chair before she went to sleep on Thursday nights. The face-down phone. The exhaustion she would not explain. The version he had built in that chair had an answer for all of it. That is how it works when fear gets enough time and silence to operate in. It does not stay vague. It gets specific. It gets detailed. It starts to feel like the only explanation that accounts for everything. Luther followed Officer Tatum down the hall with that story sitting in his chest like something he had already been told. Then she opened the door to that small room and started talking, and Luther felt the whole structure come apart piece by piece as she spoke. She opened the door to a small room. 2 chairs. A table between them. She sat across from Luther and told him what her officers had found inside the condemned building on Wendell Court. 2 people had been living there. Not officially. Not with permission. In a ground floor room with a working space heater, a cot, 2 folding chairs, and more food than you would expect. Canned goods on a makeshift shelf. Blankets, folded. A battery-powered lamp. Their names were Bertie and Ulysses. Estimated late 70s, both of them. Not related. They had found each other the way people do when they have run out of most other options, and they had held on. Bertie had passed away sometime in the hour before the officers arrived. Ulysses was alive, being seen by paramedics. And Loretta had been there when the officers entered. Sitting on the floor beside Bertie. Holding her hand. Officer Tatum stopped there. She let that sit. The story Luther had built in that plastic chair collapsed completely. Not slowly. All at once. She told him the rest. Loretta had been coming to that building every Thursday night for approximately 8 months. Food, medicine, clean water, blankets. She had found them in late autumn of the previous year and had been caring for them since. Alone. Without telling anyone. The cash withdrawals were for groceries. For medicine. For batteries and blankets and the small things that keep a person alive through a Cincinnati winter when the building they are sleeping in has no running water. $240 on a Thursday night at 12:22 in the morning. Luther sat with that for a moment. She was not under arrest. The trespass was not being pursued given the circumstances. She had been brought in because a death had occurred and procedure required a statement. Officer Tatum asked if Luther had any questions. He had none. Every question he had walked in with had already been answered. She brought Loretta in a minute later. Loretta stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping fully into the room. Her coat was still on. Her hands were at her sides. She looked like a woman who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had just set it down, and was still adjusting to the strangeness of empty hands. She sat across from Luther. He looked at her. She looked at him. Luther said, "Tell me." She took a breath. And she did. It started on a walk. A cold Thursday evening in late October, almost a year before all of this. She had gone out alone to clear her head after a hard week. She walked further than she meant to. She ended up near Wendell Court. And she heard something from inside that building. Not distress. Just the sound of someone there. Someone living inside a place that was supposed to be empty. She stood on that sidewalk for a long time. Then she found the gap in the fence and went in. In one of their visits, maybe the 3rd or 4th month, Bertie asked Loretta why she kept coming back. Not suspiciously. Genuinely. The way an old woman asks when she has enough experience to know that kindness usually has a shape to it, and she wanted to understand this one's shape. Loretta told her the truth. She said she had walked in one night, sat down on the floor next to a stranger, and something in her had decided this was necessary. She said she had spent 9 years helping people navigate systems and had gotten good at the system part but sometimes forgot the person part. And Bertie was just the person part. No form to file. No outcome to document. Just a person in a room who deserved to have someone show up. Bertie listened to all of that. Then she said, "Well, you are a strange one." And then she laughed. Loud and sudden and completely at odds with her small frame. The laugh of someone who had earned the right to find things funny on their own terms. That laugh was what made Loretta certain she was going to keep coming back, every Thursday, for as long as it took. She carried that laugh in her head on the harder nights. On the nights the cold was worse and Bertie's breathing was heavier and what was coming felt more present in the room. She would hold onto that laugh like a handhold. Luther never heard it. Never sat in that room. Never knew that room existed until a police officer called him at 2:17 in the morning. That is the part Luther carries. Not guilt, exactly. The clear-eyed understanding that something real was happening 2 blocks from where he slept every Thursday night, and the person he loved most was in the middle of it, and he was not. Not because she did not want him there. Because somewhere along the way Luther had become someone she could not bring this to. She told him her hands were shaking when she sat down on that floor next to Bertie. She pressed them flat against her knees so Bertie would not see. She had walked into a condemned building in the dark alone and she was scared, but she understood that whoever was in there did not need someone else's fear added to their situation. She found Bertie sitting in the dark with a flashlight that was nearly out of batteries and a blanket that was not close to warm enough. Bertie looked up at her without surprise, without fear, with the stillness of someone who has been through enough that new things no longer startled her. They sat together and talked for 2 hours. Bertie was 78. She had a daughter in Kentucky, but there had been a fracture there that had not mended, and Bertie had decided at some point not to let anyone know where she was. She was not looking to be saved or relocated or handed to a system. She was living. Making it through each day on what she had. Ulysses had arrived at the building 2 months before Loretta found them. He had been a machinist most of his life and talked sometimes about what his hands used to know how to do. He did not talk much about how he ended up where he was. Loretta did not push. She went back the following Thursday. Food. Batteries. Better blankets. She kept it practical. She did not push either of them toward shelters or services they had already decided were not for them. She just showed up. Every week. Same time. She looked at him across that table and said, "They did not want to be anyone's project, Luther." She paused. They just wanted someone to see them. Luther sat with that sentence for a moment. He thought about the receipt in the kitchen drawer. The story he had built around it in that plastic chair an hour ago. The specific, detailed, fully assembled version of events he had been so certain about. He had taken a cash withdrawal for groceries and medicine and built an entire betrayal from it. He had taken a woman who was spending her Thursday night sitting on a cold concrete floor caring for 2 elderly people the world had forgotten and turned her, in his own mind, into someone entirely different. That is the part Luther has had to sit with the longest. Luther asked her why she had not told him. She was quiet for a moment, choosing how to say it right. She said, "Do you remember 2 years ago, the elderly man from work? Living in his car while his daughter kept calling the organization to intervene, and he kept refusing." Luther said he remembered. She said, "You told me, at some point you have to let people make their own choices, even the wrong ones. You said it like it was obvious." I stayed quiet. "I know you did not mean it hard," she said. "But I heard something else in it. I heard that you thought there was a point where the right thing to do was stop. And I could not stop from this. So I did not want to spend every Thursday explaining myself to someone who would respond practically when I needed something different." Luther let that settle. She was not saying he was a bad man. She was saying that one sentence, said casually on one ordinary evening 2 years ago, had been enough for her to decide to carry all of this alone. And she had carried it for 8 months. Luther thought about the receipt in the kitchen drawer. The story he had built around it. The conclusions he had almost walked into that room ready to confirm. He felt something then that he still feels when he thinks about it. Not just relief. Something that costs more than relief. The specific shame of realizing how far the mind went in the wrong direction about someone who deserved better. He asked her about Bertie. Something in her face released. She said Bertie had been declining for 3 weeks. She had known it was coming. Bertie had told her the week before, plainly, without any drama, that she was tired. That she was ready. That she just did not want to go alone. Loretta had been there. She had held her hand. She started to say something else and stopped. She looked down at the table. One breath. 2. Her jaw moved slightly but nothing came out. The only moment in the entire conversation where the weight of it showed completely on the outside, just for a few seconds, before she pulled herself back. Then she said quietly, she was not scared at the end. She was just ready. Luther got up from his chair. He walked around that table. He put his arms around his wife right there in that small room with the fluorescent lights and the linoleum floor. She let him hold her. Neither of them said anything for a long time. What Luther had walked in expecting to feel in that room was gone. What replaced it was harder to name. Something between gratitude and grief and the particular weight of a man who understands he almost let his own fear write a story about his wife that she did not deserve. They drove home as the sky was beginning to lighten. Carver Avenue was quiet. They walked up the stairs without talking. On the third-floor landing, Rupert's door had a light on underneath it. Loretta stopped. He stood on that sidewalk the whole time, Loretta said quietly. And he did not even know her name. I nodded. We should bring him something tomorrow, she said. They went inside. They did not go back to sleep. They made coffee and sat at the kitchen table as the sun came up outside and Loretta talked and Luther listened. Really listened. The kind of listening that is not waiting for your turn or preparing a practical response. The kind where you stay completely still and let what someone is saying land fully before anything else happens. She told him about the first night. The dead flashlight. The 2-hour conversation with a stranger. She told him what Bertie's laugh sounded like, apparently loud and sudden and completely at odds with her small frame. She told him Ulysses had once spent 45 minutes describing a specific type of industrial lathe in precise detail, and that she had listened to every word because the way he talked about it made clear that remembering it mattered to him. She told him the hardest part of every Friday morning was not the secrecy itself. She said she was never lying in her heart. The hardest part was knowing she had been somewhere full and coming back to a space where that fullness had to be quietly put away. Luther told her it did not have to be put away anymore. She looked at him across that kitchen table in the early morning light and said, I know you will. Not a compliment. A statement of what she believed to be true. There is also something Rupert said that belongs in this story. He came to our door the Saturday after everything, with a tin of cookies his daughter had sent from Cleveland. He stayed 2 hours. At some point Loretta went to make more coffee and it was just the two of us at the table. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he had almost not followed her that night. He said he had talked himself out of it twice. Luther asked him what finally made him go. He said, Delphine. My wife. She used to say, if you see something that needs doing and you have the ability to do it, then it is your place. The question of whether it is your business comes second. He looked at his hands. Then he said, I kept hearing those footsteps for 8 months. That kind of consistency means something. It meant something to whoever was walking. I finally decided it meant something to me too. Rupert comes for dinner about once a month now. He and Loretta argue cheerfully about old movies. He is good company. He is the kind of person you do not fully see until circumstances put you together in a waiting room at 2:30 in the morning and you discover you have both been paying attention to the same thing from completely different directions, without knowing it, for nearly a year. Ulysses spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Loretta connected him with people she trusted to handle it right. Not to process him. To listen first. 3 months later he called her on a Saturday afternoon from his transitional housing. He said the room was warm. The bed was good. He had been sleeping through the night. She was standing in their kitchen when she took that call. Luther watched her cry after she hung up. He did not try to say anything or fix anything. He just stayed close until she was done, and then he handed her a paper towel because they were out of tissues, and she laughed through the last of the tears. That laugh was everything. Luther thinks about Loretta's Thursday nights all the time now. Not the way he thought about them when he was afraid of them. Something entirely different. She walked into a condemned building on a cold October night and stayed. For 8 months she stayed. Not because anyone asked her to. Not because her job required it. No recognition coming, no reward, no one who even knew. She stayed because two people needed someone to show up, and showing up was simply who she was. A peaceful marriage is not always the same as a close one. Luther had lived inside that gap for years without understanding it had a name. What that kitchen table conversation taught him, as the sun came up over Cincinnati, was that closeness is not something that just exists between two people who love each other. It is something you have to keep choosing. In the small moments. In the questions you ask instead of swallowing. In the way you listen when someone tells you something that does not have a practical answer. Loretta still goes out sometimes, on cold evenings, to check on Ulysses. She tells Luther now. He knows when she is going and where, and she comes home and tells him how Ulysses is doing, and they sit at the kitchen table and talk about it the way partners are supposed to. It is not a grand transformation. Just two people who decided to stop leaving each other alone with things too heavy to carry solo. Every Thursday for 8 months, she had left Luther. But she had never once left love. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below and share where you are watching from. Share it with someone who needs it today. And subscribe so you do not miss the next one.